Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Mike Norris. Mike Norris represents the 144th Assembly District in New York State, an Assembly District that includes Erie, Niagara, and Orleans counties. And we want to thank you folks all across Western New York for joining us for our program today. Mike Norris, it's nice to see you.
Thank you, Mike. Nice to be here today.
We got a lot going on here to fit in the next 15 minutes. We are closing out this 2017 legislative session, just a few weeks to go. Of course, we're going to need an update from you on what's going on with the flooding along the shoreline of Lake Ontario. But you know, we're coming off of the Memorial Day holiday, and you know, it's an important time of year. It's an important time to remember those who gave the ultimate for their country. And I'm going to bet that you spent part of that Memorial Day weekend at events around your district.
I did, and I had the opportunity to actually be the guest speaker in the town of Somerset at their ceremony to honor those who gave the ultimate sacrifice on this Memorial Day. And it was really very nice to be there, very humbling. And we had the opportunity to talk about those who paid that ultimate sacrifice, and to also thank those veterans who are serving us both here and abroad. And I also had a chance to participate in a parade in Lockport and in a ceremony there at the monument as well. But when you think about the veterans, and I had a lot of time to think about that, it made me reflect upon some of the legislation that I've sponsored in the New York State Assembly coming up in this session. One being that any active member of the military would be able to have their hunting and fishing license fees be removed while they're spending active time in the service. So if they're home during a period of time, they'll be able to go out and to hunt and to fish without the actual fee being imposed on them. And another thing that I've been working on is for all those individuals who did serve, that they would be able to go to our campsites in New York State. We have great campsites, great opportunities, particularly even along Lake Ontario and in the Adirondacks and elsewhere, and they would be able to go there and to rent cabins for up to 14 days at no cost. So I think this is a good opportunity, both these pieces of legislation, to give back to those who served us and why we're free today.
That's just it. I mean, they might not sound like major legislative initiatives, but it's a way to, as you say, tip your cap to those people who are devoting their lives right now to representing us nationally, globally, and keeping us safe and free.
Absolutely, and we should pay a special thanks to all those who are serving and who have served, and remember them and provide them incentives. One other plan that we're working on is a Business Enterprise Act. I'm a co-sponsor on that bill, which would help veterans, when they come back, be able to open up small businesses and get their feet on the ground. And then that's another initiative that we're working on as well. So there are many things that we're trying to do to help promote the veterans, thank the veterans, and encourage them to settle back into to a peaceful life here back in the States.
That's interesting. I've seen some of that in over the last year or two in different places that I've been. Businesses that are owned by, operated by veterans, and think that they can get a leg up on that. That could be a very good thing for them.
It certainly could be.
Yeah.
And that's why we're pushing that legislation, and I'm hopeful that in due time, that program will be adopted.
All right, let's get that update now on Lake Ontario. Are all the houses along the shore sliding into the water right now?
I tell you, it is a very serious situation,
I shouldn't
Mike.
be making light of it.
I had an opportunity to, while we were off on 1 week recess there, I took the chance to go through my district, the 4 towns, the town of Porter, Wilson, Newfane, and Somerset. And we started in Wilson, for example. I talked to many of the marina operators, to the business owners down there, and I saw firsthand the devastation that's occurring to those businesses, to the marinas, and to the property owners. Many of them have lost significant amounts of land. Some are up on a bluff. They've lost some land that way. Some have just lost it when they're in the lower levels. We need to really focus on this issue and pay special attention. I would like to, first of all, thank the governor so far for his efforts in assisting us. For example, he has provided us with sandbags when necessary. He's provided us emergency equipment when requested, and we appreciate all that help that he's providing us. He's also provided across the whole southern shore of Lake Ontario some incentives, $10 million for municipalities to make sure that they can get that resources to fix roads and sewers, pumps along the lake shore. Also, he opened up $7 million for property owners if your house is in immediate danger, and he opened up $5 million for businesses. However, there's a lot more that needs to be done. I am very proud to say that I am co-sponsoring a bill with the Assembly Majority Leader, Joe Morelli, to provide $105 million of funding to help the situation. $40 million would be provided to property owners and businesses. $40 million would be provided to municipalities to shore up the beaches and the infrastructure along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, and another $25 million for mitigation concerns. The Senate did adopt a bill for $55 million. I commend our senators, Senator Ort and Jacobs, Rensenhofer and Gellerman from Western New York, for recognizing this problem. And I'm hopeful that this bill can be negotiated out in the final days of session to provide the much needed relief for the property owners who are suffering so bad along the southern shore of Lake Ontario.
Because as you folks know, the bills need to be identical that come out of the Assembly and the Senate in order to be able to go to the governor for his signature. Let's take a look right now at what Mike Norris had to say when the Assembly's bill came up on the floor for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on this bill today, and I would like to commend the sponsor, Assemblyman Morelli, for sponsoring this legislation. I am very proud to represent 4 towns along Lake Ontario, and we are in a crisis situation right now. We have got businesses and property owners who are under siege, and we deeply appreciate the efforts of the Majority Leader for his bipartisan effort in this, and I would just like to encourage all my colleagues to also support this legislation. Thank you very much.
And what's instructive about this for somebody like me who lives near the state capitol, which is quite a distance from the Lake Ontario shoreline, is that I need to be reminded about how bad a situation this really is for the people that are living it day to day. And I think that's why it's so good when you can have people like the Lieutenant Governor travel to your towns and see it firsthand, so she can bring those kind of reports back here to Albany as a sort of a first-hand witness to just how bad things are.
That's right, Mike. And I joined the Lieutenant Governor in Orchid along with Judge Morinello and Senator Rob Ort and explained to her the problems that are occurring. She saw firsthand, and I will tell you, she immediately got on the telephone with the emergency departments of the state and got us some more equipment when needed. And, you know, it's also important, and I'm very proud to say I represent this area, for me to go on the floor and speak to my fellow colleagues about the urgent need that's occurring up there. And I think that's the beauty about having the body of the Assembly, where we all come from our own districts, and then we can explain to those individuals who represent other parts of the state the crises that are going here. You know, for like Superstorm Sandy, for example, of course I would have seen it on TV, but I would not, and I was not in the Assembly at the time. But that's an example where we would have, you know, those colleagues would have told us about those serious problems occurring up there. So I also do want to just thank the volunteer firemen and the local National Guard that has been there, as well as the local highway crews, and the local county and town officials who are working so hard on that. I talked, for example, with Supervisor Tim Hornberg from Newfane about the amount of time that the volunteer fire companies are spending up there around the clock, particularly on the weekend and particularly at nights, to making sure the pumps are running constantly, to make sure the sandbags are being emplaced. These folks are working around the clock, all volunteer, and they really, truly need to be commended for the work that they're doing. And this is not going to just stop right now. This is going to be a thing that's going to be ongoing throughout the next several months. So we need to make sure we thank them and recognize them, our highway crews, the National Guard that the governor sent there. Everyone is working in a very strong manner together to help those residents along the southern shore.
And if I'm that ignorant about what's going on the Lake Ontario shoreline, you're gonna need to let the guys and gals who represent Manhattan and the Queens and Bronx, because you know they've got their own districts and their own worlds in which they live. I hear tell some of those folks maybe have never even seen a cow before, even though agriculture is New York's #1 industry. And I'm sure you're going to be learning quite a lot about New York City issues by the time your legislative career here is over. So there's a lot of learning to do going both ways in this state.
There is, and I tell you, it's important right now that the folks recognize that we are suffering, the property owners are suffering. This is the highest point that the lake has ever been in its history. Right now, over 31 inches higher than normal, and the highest it's ever been. I've seen firsthand the damage. I've seen firsthand the destruction on those business owners in the marinas, and we need help. We really need help, and I'm very confident that working in a bipartisan manner with Assemblyman Joe Morelli, who's the majority leader of the Assembly, and also with the governor's office and the Senate, we will get some results for the people who are suffering so badly right now in my district.
We'll be staying in touch with you, of course, over coming weeks as to how events are going. Just a few more minutes to this program, just a couple more weeks to this legislative session. What sorts of things would you like to see happen in these remaining few days?
Well, there are two things that are particularly of importance to me, and that is the State Contract Sunlight Act. I'm very proud to say I've introduced this legislation to make sure that we provide the sunlight in on the contracts that are being let out in New York State. And what this bill would do is that if there was a contract that's being let out, whether it be for small equipment, right through up to the Buffalo Billion Initiative, is that it would have to be placed onto a statewide database so the public can see exactly what those contracts say, what the requirements are, are there provisions for job creation, and then we would also hold those provisions accountable long-term with clawback provisions, for example. The other thing about that bill is once it's placed on the database, it would require a 14-day waiting period before the comptroller and the Attorney General signs off on the final contract as they're required to do. And this would allow the public to say, wait a minute, we have an issue with this, we want you to weigh it. The Attorney General and the Comptroller, they're vested with the authority to approve the contracts. I have no problem with that, but this would allow the public to say, wait a minute, could you please look at this particular issue? I don't like this provision of the contract. And then he can decide whether or not he will move forward or not, but at least the public will have a say in these contracts.
The bidding process itself was set up so that hopefully you weren't going to have any of these kind of problems. But I guess there's been enough issues, some situations that have come up, and I think of some of the governor's aides who are facing charges right now connected to bid rigging, that I guess the public bidding process, some feel really needs a good tweaking.
Many people do, and I also agree. That's why I've introduced the State Contract Sunlight Act to make sure we provide transparency and openness in our government so people can see exactly where their taxpayer money is going. Listen, this is their money. Every time I walk in the state capitol, I say to myself, Mike, this is a taxpayer's money. And I'm so proud to be the representative from this district, but I also remember that I'm there and it's their money that we're spending, and they should have an open and transparent process.
Get the feeling sometimes there are some elected state officials that have forgotten that, who don't think that this money is coming from taxpayers, and that if maybe they were a little more conservative with it, a little more frugal, a little more efficient, economy-minded, that maybe those dollars could go. It's not just a limitless pit of money that they can go in with buckets and take it out, that there's people that are giving this money out of their own pockets in order to fund all these different things the state government does.
Yeah, and it's about accountability. I mean, this is their money, and the legislature, the governor, the economic team should be held accountable for the money that's being spent. And I think this act will go a long way to providing open and transparent government.
If you folks watching want to know how you can reach out to your representative, you can contact Mike Norris very easily at his office in Williamsville. Call 716-839-4690 or drop him an email at norrism@nyassembly.gov. norrism@nyassembly.gov. Mike Norris, thanks for joining us today. Just a couple weeks to go to this legislative session. We'll find out what happens. We hope you folks will join us for our next Assembly calendar.